Hi, aloha, and welcome to the Empowered Empath podcast. My name is Jennifer O'Neill.
And I'm Michelle Schneider, and I'll give you a friendly reminder to like today's video if you like the topic and subscribe if you haven't already.
Yes, today we are going to be expanding upon a subject because we felt like we kind of cut it short and there was a lot more to discuss about telepathy as in regards to, I think, all things. I really like this subject. I think that it's a fun subject to talk about. I think it's a subject that a lot of people haven't quite grasped the concept on. It feels, I want to almost say magical in a sense, like, how could I ever get to that point? But it would be really cool if I did, sort of way. Like, I feel like people would love to explore telepathy, but feel like they're limited in their ability to explore telepathy. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I consume a lot of content. So I listen to a lot of different healers out there, a lot of different, people. And think one of the things that I've heard, and I would love to know if you agree with this, is, the energy that we're moving into, like telepathy is going to become more prominent. It's going to be kind of like unlocked for a lot more people. Would you agree with that? Like
Well,
as
I
we're
think
moving forward?
so. I think that that would be true, but I look at it very differently. I don't feel like it's ever been locked
Well, to
in
somebody who
essence,
like me,
you know?
I've experienced it a little bit, but it's not like a constant. Like it's not something I can just turn on necessarily where I feel like it's always kind of on for you.
Well, I feel like you could turn it on. I feel like you could learn to turn it on. That's just the things that I work with all the students on. This is a subject that I haven't taught much about with some of the students. But if that was somebody's goal, I don't think that that would be incredibly difficult. It just would come with the training. But what I find kind of interesting is I feel like there's three huge languages, so to speak, within our existence. One is verbal. We everybody knows what a verbal language is: English, Spanish, French, Italian, whatever. It's verbal. Then
Yeah.
we have and then energy. Energy is a language that is extremely powerful. Carries information. Has a lot of um, stuff that we can transfer from one person to another, or one item to all things that can transfer between things. Then we have telepathic communication, which is widely known in the spirit realm, widely used. The primary use of language in the spirit realm is going to be telepathy, and it's going to be energetic. It's less verbal, but we're very into our physical senses here. So since we're very into our physical beingness, verbal feels more important and more real, I guess I would say. But that's not the case in most aspects of existence. The case in most aspects of existence is the energetic and the telepathic communication. And truthfully, I mean, the energetic and the telepathic kind of go together in essence, because it's transferred through energy, right? It's
Yeah.
transferred through thought and whatever. I am separating the two a little bit for the sake of this conversation, because I think that how people view that is telepathic information is more directive. I feel like to a lot of times the people or the experience or somebody is grabbing information the other person's forming, or they're receiving or transferring the information that might be more personal, or kind of pertaining to those people or whatever. When it comes to an energetic exchange of information and moving information through frequency, as far as energy is concerned as a whole, that's a lot more expansive, I feel like, because that can carry so much more info. Now we're talking, I feel like that's the difference between having a messaging system on a computer, and I'm going to message Michelle, I'm going to tell you or email you something. that would feel more telepathic versus the computer based knowledge, which would be the energetic knowledge and the stuff that you would receive and tune into. It's so much more broad in
Yeah.
that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I think that the subject of telepathy is very interesting to a lot of people. It's interesting to me that it's coming up a lot right now. I think that it's coming up a lot right now because we most likely are moving that direction as the people as a whole start to learn to balance their spiritual body with their physical body, and they start to learn to navigate their spiritual senses. All of these things will begin to develop for them: claircognizance, clairsentience, clairvoyance, all the things. They're going to naturally amplify. It's just like if you were just like using your physical body, and the more that you use it as a baby, the more you get control over grabbing items, or you're more aware of what smells mean, etc.
Yeah.
You're aware of your physical senses and you learn to navigate those. Same thing will happen with your spiritual body as you kind of go down that exploratory road. You're also going to learn to develop those senses as well and hone them in and skill make that use them in a more skilled manner. So as people start to walk down that road and journey that way, I feel that absolutely they're going to open the door to telepathy because that's part of the package is telepathic communication. I think that while I do feel like a lot of people have the ability to work with telepathy, I do feel like a lot of people feel like it's unreachable. But then that goes into our first podcast talking about the children and animals. Their belief systems and their perspectives are not as tainted as adults
Yeah.
as we and grow and experience many things and then introduce ourselves to fear and worry. We then so it's a pure more of a pure belief system, a pure perspective because they're not skewed by things. So of course their ability is going to be way higher on the that scale of things, just simply
Yeah.
for that manner.
And I wonder too if it's like, because I have an example that I'll give where maybe we are doing it and we don't even realize that we're doing it. And so
Oh,
because we don't even
100%.
realize,
Absolutely, 100%. People do it all the time and don't realize they're doing it, and I like that because that is a very poignant observation. Before this part slips my mind, this kind of goes along with the same lines. I don't think that people realize how often they're receiving telepathic communication from spirits. It is so often you would be mind boggled, literally mind boggled, how often you're receiving telepathic communication from guides or loved ones, but I would say primarily from guides and things like that. They like to communicate with you telepathically often. The thing is, everybody assumes it's their own thoughts.
yeah,
they they want to take credit for all these thoughts. And sometimes your guide is trying to nudge you in a direction or prompt you to do something. And so you receive telepathic information and you receive it in a form that you feel is your thought process. And that's often not the case. So I find it interesting how much that people think that they come up with these ideas, or I all of a sudden thought about this. I all of a sudden felt like maybe I should open a business, or I should probably call somebody. I mean, those are telepathically prompted thoughts. They
yeah.
are messages, they're nudges from the other side. Oh, people receive those all the time. Like that's it, it's really funny to me how much that people want to own those those thoughts.
Yeah, and the example I was gonna share was I was at my nephew's, I think it was his 2nd birthday party, and my sister was kinda just walking around kind of frantically, and I was like, "Oh, are you looking for a marker?" She had a water bottle in her hand, and I thought, like, she was wanting to write her name. Now, none of this was communicated, so I was like, "Oh, are you looking for a marker?" And it took me a while to realize that she didn't say anything. She had not prompted that in any way, and I was like, "That's not normal," that I knew exactly what she was looking for, or
Maybe
what
that
she
should
was
be our
trying to do.
podcast. That's not normal. Actually, that would
No,
be
I meant,
really
like
great.
I mean, like
That would be a fantastic name. We should rename it from the Empowered Empath to That's Not Normal podcast. I actually really like that. Um, so that being said, absolutely, there's some telepathic communication going on there. The other thing that I think people wouldn't necessarily relate to telepathic communication is something that I do all the time. And it's funny because the people on the receiving end of it, I never really kind of broke this down until we're having this conversation right now. This is so interesting to me. The people on the receiving end of it, I know think it's their thoughts. And so now this is now the people that I hang out with, if they're listening, they're going to be like, "Oh geez, now I'm going to watch for all the thoughts I have when I'm around Jen because they're going to be what is she putting in my head?" But that's not what I mean. Let me give you some examples, just clarify all of this. So, if I will be thinking something along the lines of I think we've talked about this before, but if I don't wanna get up and I'll be like, "I hope that somebody comes and shuts off this light," because I'm right in the middle of something that I don't wanna get up, or I'm really hungry. I wish that somebody would, maybe say, "Hey, what do you want for lunch?" or something. Just simply because in my household, people are often getting lunch at different times, and they'll always ask anybody, "You want me to grab you something?" And so every time I have thoughts like that, somebody will come by, shut off the light, or I will have somebody literally I've had people call me going, so, I'm stopping somewhere. Do you want some lunch? Or, to give you some examples.
Yeah,
But it's happened so much to me at this point that if I decide that I want something to kind of manifest into my existence, I just throw it out there as far as it'd be really nice if I would like maybe my car to get washed or something, whatever. It's just something
yeah,
like random like that. And I'm noticing how often people in my family or my friends will immediately respond to my thought process, which in essence means that they're telepathically receiving.
yeah,
They are telepathically receiving what I'm putting out there in my thoughts. And I experiment with it a lot just because I find it kind of fun and interesting. So, and helpful because then I can just kind of put some directive energy out there and people grab onto it and then they help me with doing some other things. So, it's really interesting. These people, many of the people that I'm talking to you about are clearly highly sensitive.
yeah,
They are aware that they have sensitive abilities, whether that be psychic stuff or they talk to spirits or whatever. They're not doing what I'm doing for a living, but I have also had that happen with people who were not, like forward in saying that they have or abilities, or maybe not recognize them in a way that they would be forthright about it, but yet I know that they do have some sensitive abilities. So my point being, they don't have to be aware or on, quote unquote, on at that moment in time to receive the information, then act upon the information. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So more people than not are receiving telepathic information in different forms in different ways. They just want to receive it in a certain way. That's the other thing. I think that that's the hiccup When I'm teaching people to communicate with spirits, when I'm teaching people to channel or receive psychic information, I find often that they have a preconceived notion of how that information is going to come into the body,
Yeah.
into their mind. And with this preconceived notion, they cause themselves problems and blocks, because I can tell you right now, more people get it wrong than get it right. More people get it wrong on how they're actually receiving information than they do going, "Oh, I know I receive information this way." Most people get that wrong. And once you just help them understand how they're receiving it, and the gold here is everybody's a little bit different, and that's where you can make some huge progress with people. Like if I'm teaching them, is everybody is a little bit different, so the way that you're going to receive information or perceive it might be different from Janice or Joe or John or whoever. So everybody's going to receive it differently, and everybody wants to receive it very clear, clairvoyant wise, or very clear clairaudient wise. And I believe that they do that because they're so used to sight and
Mhm.
hearing as a way to perceive information, that they don't have the level of trust yet on how the spiritual body's sight works and how the spiritual body's um, hearing works. But then we got to take that a step further. Most of the strongest, I would say, psychic senses or spiritual senses are actually clairsentience and claircognizance, in a way that it's not always coming with a picture. It's not always coming through hearing. Those don't have to happen to receive very accurate uh, information.
Yeah.
So, does that make
It's
sense?
so subtle, I feel like, because I know a lot of times, it would be so much easier if it was like, "You've got mail," and it's, like, coming in as a message, and you're like, "Oh, okay, this is information," where it's not like that at all. It's so subtle that you
I
just
feel now, I do feel like it's subtle in the beginning, but I do not receive subtle information. Like, for me, it's no, it's a whack you
you're
in the face.
different. You're like
Okay, that's fair. I am different. But what I feel like makes it different from my information being very strong and very impactful is, okay, well, there is past life probably, and, I mean, birth charts, but there's also my trust in it. My trust and my belief in, I've been working with my spiritual body for so long. I'm so familiar with those senses that my senses have been strengthened over time to a very, I would say, high level, in the way that I also trust that I trust them more than I trust my analytical, senses, and my physical senses breaking things down. I think that there's a lot of illusionary things that can happen in the physical realm, which is interesting because I feel like other people think it's the opposite. They feel like, oh, that could be this way or that way. Like, they think of different ways that it's not exactly what you're receiving or hearing or seeing. Like, oh, it could be this, could be that. But I think of that in the physical realm. You're not seeing everything. You're not hearing everything. You're not perceiving everything. It's very interesting to me when people perceive their physical environment and take it very much at face value, because they're not seeing the full picture ever. When you do that, there's so much more that weighs into that, and that's where your spiritual senses become very important, and hence the telepathic stuff will become more clear. Because when you're looking at something from the outside, if I'm looking at the way somebody's perceiving something from the outside, I'm noticing they're missing a lot of stuff. They're missing the weight of the energy, the direction of the energy, telepathic communication that they may be receiving or that I'm receiving on it. There's so much more to that experience and that window that you should be taking into account, because your eyes can be deceiving. Your experiences are absolutely deceiving. So you take past history experiences and you put them into your current reality, and you use your eyeballs and your hearing to then analyze, and that it's super deceiving. I don't think
Yeah.
that that is a good way to perceive things at all. There has to be somewhat of a balance where you're weighing in the spiritual body, the telepathic information, the energy that you're receiving. Those those are a must have factor in navigating. Did that just take a left turn? Did we just move off into another subject?
I don't not completely left turn, but I mean, we're just
Okay.
talking.
So I I feel, to your point, that everybody wanting the "we've got mail" situation, that's a very physical way to think, but the spiritual body gives you absolutely gives you very strong indicators of "we've got mail."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
It's
will say when I was doing readings in, South Dakota, and it didn't happen with every reading I did, but I remember some where I was like, "Oh, it felt like my entire spine lit up."
Mhm.
It felt like this sensation of like, "Oh, I'm connected to something."
Oh, yeah, it absolutely, you can feel it in the body. You will 100% feel a sensation somewhere within the body when you're receiving information. So it's easy to differentiate from other things. And that's where training comes in. That's where you're learning to be familiar with your spiritual body and how it feels. Because until you learn to separate the two bodies while allowing them to work together, the only reason you're separating them is you're allowing your brain to compartmentalize. These are spiritual body feelings, these are physical body feelings, so that it can analyze the best outcome or whatever. It can weigh all the things. That's why you would want to separate. But everybody just assumes every single physical sensation or sensation that they're having is in the physical body, and that's not true. You have very strong spiritual body sensations. You're just assuming they're physical sensations. They feel very similar. So you just have to learn the difference between the two. And again, that comes with training. So there's that.
Okay, some questions for you. As we're chatting, now it's like hard for me to distinguish what's actually telepathy versus just receiving psychic information. So what would your definition be
Well, a
between?
couple of things. I think that telepathy is psychic information, number one. So I think that it overlaps. It absolutely is psychic and energetic information. I think that when it comes to the term telepathy, however, it's more of a directive. It's more of a, I want to have a conversation with you somehow. So, like, if his spirit is giving you information or giving you a sentence or talking to you, and you receive that as a thought, that's telepathic communication. If I am talking to you or the universe and I'm like, wished XYZ would happen, or I've had things where my schedule got so full and I was like, it would be nice if somebody had to reschedule because something would happen or I would be running behind. And then my client will email and reschedule. This has happened to me several times. It's very strange. And so they are receiving some directive conversation from me, in essence. We're
Yeah.
having a directive conversation. That's why I said I relate it more to like a chat or an email or something where you're specifically trying to reach somebody with a directive.
Yeah, it's
That
kind of
makes
like,
sense.
well, in that scenario, it's kind of like you're with your thoughts, you're kind of like putting that out there and then just somebody's kind of like plucking it from the
Well, I think when it comes to telepathy, how people view it is, I would say, more personal. Like, I'm going to think about, I really wish Michelle would call me or something. I was just working through this. Sorry. I'm kind of tripping myself up just as I'm trying to come up with a story for you. This is a good one, though. If I'm very busy, there has been times, I'm gonna use you for example, where I'll be
Mhm.
like, "I need to call Michelle to discuss the podcast or something, but I don't have time, so, um, I maybe she'll call me, but I do need to call her." And then you would call me in, like, 10 minutes. That happens to me all the time. Like, my schedule is so busy that there will be oftentimes somebody in the back of my head. I will think, "Oh, I gotta get a hold of them. I gotta talk to them about XYZ." Could be plans for dinner, could be whatever, and I know I don't have time, but I'm kinda working through it in my head, like, I need to remember I want to call and talk to, my friend, or I wanna call and talk to my kids or something, and they'll call me. It's ever like, that almost never fails. That's more of a directive telepathic communication, if that makes sense. Does that
Yeah.
help to clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did use the example of it would be nice if somebody turned on, or turned off a light or something. And that's more of I'm directing it out there for anybody to go ahead and grab, but they absolutely receive my thoughts. They receive what I'm wanting to happen. They're receiving my directive, I guess
Yeah.
I would say, my communication. So, the reason that I use that for an example is because the more I thought about it, the more interesting it got to me that it's oftentimes that I will do that because I know it works and because it's habit for me to talk to the universe and just kind of, have conversation out there. And oftentimes it's received by somebody who wouldn't consider themselves high on the, psychic scale or high on the sensitivity scale.
Yeah.
They would consider themselves like average. And so that's a easy indication that a lot of people are receiving telepathic information. And I also know, again, that people receive a lot of telepathic information from their spirit guides. I
Yeah.
could probably talk with most people and show you an example of something that you've received from a spirit guide.
You say the full on conversations that I have in my head, is that not just my thoughts?
It depends. There are different types of conversations, but,
Yeah.
sometimes, no, they're not. A lot of times, they're not going to be just your thoughts. No. Where we have one of the big ways to tell the difference if you're kinda looping through your thoughts and maybe you're wondering, "Is this a telepathic conversation I'm having with my guides or, other spirits or whatever?" You can notice that if they start having a negative undertone to them, those are typically your thoughts. As weird as that is, those can be your thoughts oftentimes. If you are in a situation where a thought pops into your head out of nowhere that might be like preventative or like don't go that way or avoid that store,
Mhm.
those I feel like some people would go, "Well, that's happened. Is that just my thoughts?" No, that would be more, psychically, received or perceived from your guides. So, I guess that now I have to backtrack a little bit because it wouldn't be necessarily the negative undertone to it, although that is a pretty good indicator that it's usually your thoughts. But if you start kinda looping, like you're going over it and over it. You're kind of obsessing
Yeah,
a little bit
ruminating.
and you're looping or one spin is spinning into another and spinning into another. You're spiraling in
Yeah.
essence. Now that's your thought process. The way that spirits are not going to typically go over things over and over and over. However, there can be times where you open yourself energetically to negative spirits too. If you're keeping a low vibrational frequency, if you alcohol can do it if you're drinking a lot of alcohol and you're keeping a low vibrational frequency, you are susceptible to cracks that will pull in negative spirits and they will help you feed upon negative thought processes. So they will allow you to come up with a negative scenario and then they will push the narrative. So
Yeah.
that should have confused the heck out of everybody at this point in time. But I guess, they just they work differently. So we tend to obsess, and we tend to
Mhm.
obsess about negative probable outcomes, or we tend to beat ourselves up about things and be like, why would we do that? We should have done something differently. Those are not typically healthy spirits ever. If you're having negative thoughts, let's just say they're either your own, or you, because of your frequency, you have then tuned in to non-healthy spirits, we'll say, ones that would push your negative narrative with you
Makes
and
sense.
jump on that train and be like, yeah, you really messed that up. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want more random questions?
Yes.
Um, can you tune into anybody's thoughts, or are some people more guarded where they could protect their thoughts?
I think that this is an interesting question. I feel like if you're trained really well, you can tune into most people's thoughts telepathically. What people don't realize is when you're telepathically often communicating, oftentimes you're getting more of a narrative and a story that you are then summing down. So you may not get every and the or in your telepathic communication, but you're going to get the gist of the thoughts that are going through their head. I think that if you train yourself to work with your psychic senses enough, your spiritual senses, your spiritual body, yeah, you can pretty much read or perceive most thoughts that are going through people's head. Now, there's different ways to read or perceive those thoughts telepathically. You might just energetically tune into their frequency, because people don't realize that when other people have a thought, it goes out into the universe as a frequency. And this is breaking it down a little bit more. It's interesting to me that people feel like all the thoughts that they have, and this is where the telepathy kind of comes in, just are their own. They're their own, and they're locked in their thought process, which would be their memory bank in their brain. Somehow that they're just locked in there. Your thoughts are all part of a greater frequency, always.
Mhm.
And because of that, they go out on a frequency wave. It's not as difficult to perceive or receive telepathic information for that reason. You don't have them locked up in a box. They're not behind some wall that is not permeable. Frequencies work differently than the physical realm. We can't lock and block frequencies. It moves through all things, it moves through everything. So, frequency is where your thoughts go. They create a wave, and now it's out there. It's out there for anybody to grab, truthfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about time and space? Does that matter? Can you tune into somebody's thoughts that's across the country?
Easily.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that
that's
that could be a lot of, like, you know, like, somebody that doesn't realize that, that I think there's a lot of people out there who think, like, you have to be right next to each other, that
well, I think that you're right, but I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening, that are gonna listen to this podcast, are going to go, "Yes, I've had that happen with my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, who does not live in the same state." You know, we
Yeah, and
have
I'm
this
just
connection. And so they're gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, that's totally happened to me." Actually, if that's happening to you, you should comment below, because it will be interesting, because I'm sure that there's going to be many people that have had that happen with loved ones or people that are far from them. And that's because loved ones and people you're close to, you typically blend frequencies. You have a frequency entanglement with people who are close to you. That's good in some ways, and then if it gets codependent, it cannot be good, the frequency entanglement, which means that it's like you've saved that person's frequency on your playlist. Just think of it
yeah.
that way.
That's an
You're
interesting, point that you brought up, because just thinking back to the podcast that I think originally kind of sparked this was the telepathy tapes.
Mhm.
And so in that, I think it was in the first couple episodes, they were talking about how one of the children, they're like, they can only read their mother's thoughts. They can't read anybody else's thoughts. And I was just kind of like, I don't think that's true. But like if they did have that kind of frequency or stronger connection, obviously, with their mother, then yeah,
Oh, yeah,
they're probably
absolutely.
picking up on that information.
Absolutely. When you are developing your psychic senses, your spiritual senses, there are people where that love connection, that amplifies your spiritual senses. So when you're very tuned in and tied to loved ones, that amplifies your spiritual connection with them. It amplifies your psychic connection, therefore, with them, and it amplifies the frequency entanglement, the part where you're intertwined with their frequency. So everything becomes more connected. Everything becomes more amplified. It doesn't mean that you can't train yourself to um, learn how to work with other people's frequencies or broaden, but then that's scary for people sometimes, so
Yeah.
they don't want to, they feel like exposed, I guess I would say, and maybe not as safe as they would with loved ones, being like, oh no, I know this person, I'm comfortable with their energy, exchanging energy. They're not going to think of it that way, but that's basically what's happening, is you're letting all the blocks down on both ends, where you're just feeling very comfortable and you're amplifying that connection.
That would make a lot of sense though with like my own personal experience of just being a lot more easily in tune with my sister and my mother. I
Mhm.
remember like just making comments on what my mom was thinking about, like not even like realizing how much that freaked her out. But I think just because, yeah, they're family and we've got that sort of very close bond that it's so much easier for me to pick up on, what they're thinking about.
And it's usually, again, I relate that often to when I notice that people have that connection, I can feel that they have the amplified heart connection with that person. The interesting thing is, if you have a positive heart connection with that person, it amplifies it even more. So if you have a very loving, healthy relationship, it can amplify that even more. But you don't even have to have a healthy relationship. You can just, those people can be just so dear to your heart, and you just really just have love for them, and maybe it might even be a toxic relationship, I don't know, but it's the love amplification, it's that heart tie connection, I do feel like, that allows everybody to let their guard down and really allow that frequency to free flow informationally between the two people.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we've cleared out all connections and it's just strong. Yeah. Any more questions?
I think I'm out at the moment, but if anybody else has questions, they should definitely put them in the comments. If
Yes,
we have a
absolutely.
collection of questions at some point, we can just do, a Q&As.
Yeah, we can do a Q&A. So, yeah, put any questions in the comments, but also, yeah, comment below if you've had any, receiving or giving of telepathic information, long distance or anything. I think it'd be interesting for people to see how many other people that actually happens to. And my goal is always make it probable and possible. And so when I'm teaching people, it's, you always want to reach for the probable and the possible, because that's how you allow your belief system reform. It allows you to amplify your spiritual connection, it allows you to gravitate towards things that are just possible, and then it opens a lot more doors for you. So I think that that would be interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So if you enjoyed today's topic, please give the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already.
yes. And until next time, have a most amazing day. All right. Aloha. Bye.
Bye.